All right, hello. So AquilaCat / Elise here, and hopefully this will be the first of many videos that I'll be able to post about things like public health, toxicology, biology, things like that. Basically just whatever topic catches my fancy, or whatever topic you all want to hear about that you might not want to like put in all of the hours of research yourselves, or you just want to hear more about it. I'm happy to look into it and see what I can find out and relay it. So I'm really super hyped about this, and I hope that some of you all enjoy what I have to share as much as I enjoyed learning about it. So I'm going to go about this in different sections. This format might change as time goes on and I do more videos. We'll see. But for Poison Hemlock, I'm going to go with what is Poison Hemlock and where it can be found. How and why is it dangerous? Why we should even care about Poison Hemlock. And then I also want to go over a handful of case studies. So I'm not going to interrupt the flow of the video to like point out, hey, this is where I found this information. But whenever I get to a point where I'm referencing something in particular, you'll see a number pop up, and that number will correspond with a resource that I will list both at the end of this video and in the description below. Just to make it easier for you to find them if something intrigues you that you want to know more about, or if you want to double check the accuracy of it. Because after all, even though I do have a medical background as a veterinary technician, that was over a decade ago, and we didn't go over things in school for it, such as like the tips and tricks and techniques for determining whether an academia resource is credible or not. So hopefully I won't make any or many mistakes with these videos, but if I do, let me know. Point it out to me what the mistake was. Just let me know so that I know what that is, so I can avoid it in the future and not use that particular journal or reference or whatever. And then yeah, if I do end up making mistakes, then maybe I can add a little correction corner section to these videos. But now, with all of that out of the way, let's focus on what is Poison Hemlock and where it can be found. And I'm going to start us off with a little poem that references Poison Hemlock. My heart aches, and a drowsy numbness pains my sense, as though of hemlock I had drunk, or emptied some dull opiate to the drains 1 minute past, and lethwards had sunk. That is from Ode to a Nightingale by John Keats. Now, as shown in John Keats' poem, Poison Hemlock is well known in public knowledge. If you haven't, like, even if you don't know exactly what Poison Hemlock is, you've probably at least heard the name or just know the fact that it's poisonous. If not through mentions of it in poems like John Keats, then perhaps in various murder mystery stories like Murder in Retrospect by Agatha Christie, or in songs like Winnebago by Foo Fighters. Because after all, according to the Poison Control website, hemlock is one of the more romantic and exciting topics in plant toxicology. So it's good to know that Poison Control is passionate about what they do. As for what Poison Hemlock is, it is a plant in the Apiaceae family, also known as umbellifers, the celery family, the carrot family, or the parsley family. And, true to being the family that it's in, Poison Hemlock can be mistaken for many plants within this family. It can be mistaken for wild carrots or parsley, or it can even be mistaken with other toxic plants like water hemlock, which note is in the same family but a different species. Poison hemlock is not the same as water hemlock. Poison hemlock can also be mistaken for wild parsnips. The roots of it can be mistaken for that. The seeds can be mistaken for anise seeds. And anise, if you don't know, those seeds are the ones that taste like black licorice. It can also be mistaken for Queen Anne's lace with the flowers. There are 4 species of this, and they are all toxic. These are Conium carophyloides, Conium fontanum, Conium sphaerocarpum, and then the species that we're going to be focusing on, Poison Hemlock, which is Conium maculatum. Poison Hemlock also goes by the names of carrot fern, poison parsley, spotted hemlock, California fern, and Nebraska fern. As you can probably guess by the names and see in the pictures that I'll be adding in here, It does have a somewhat fern-like appearance in the leaves, and poison hemlock has dark purple splotches on the stem, and the stem is smooth and hairless. The plant is also known for smelling badly, something akin to like mouse urine, especially when a part of the plant, especially like the leaves, are agitated or crushed. But please note that these defining characteristics might not be present in all life stages of the plant. So if you're out foraging or something, do not rely on these alone. Like it might not have purple splotches on the stem, for example, depending on the life stage that the plant is at. Poison hemlock can get pretty tall, about 2 to 3 meters or 6 to 9 feet tall. And after the first year, it starts to flower. Although native to Europe, Asia, and North Africa, poison hemlock can quickly become an invasive plant and has now been distributed pretty much worldwide at this point. Historically, poison hemlock has been used in like assassinations and executions, and has also been used medicinally to treat things like herpes, muscle spasms, tumors, and has also been used as a sedative. However, this plant has not been recommended to use medicinally for many years now, and given just how little of the plant can be toxic, do not treat yourself with this, please. And don't go foraging around for various plants in the field if you aren't absolutely certain of what it is. People have died from mistaking poison hemlock for edible plants. Safety is most important, so please be careful and don't leave anything to chance when foraging. All right, and moving on to the next section, how and why is it dangerous? AKA, how bad can it be? Well, let's just check out this toxicity. Sorry, but also not sorry. All parts of the poison hemlock plant are poisonous, though concentrations of the toxins, that is, how much of the toxin is present in the plant, varies depending on the life stage of the plant at any given time of the year, and also varies based on ecological conditions such as the presence of the hemlock defoliating moth, Agonopteryx aloe mariana, which can feed on the plant and can also result in higher toxicity levels in the plant in areas where the moth is found due to the plants apparently adapting to the presence of this predator. Here in this picture shows all of the alkaloids present in poison hemlock. All of these are piperidines, and all of them are peripheral neurotoxins, which means that they attack the peripheral nervous system, and the peripheral nervous system includes the neurons, axons, the glia, basically the entire nervous system that isn't the brain or the spinal cord. And there is no antidote, so treating the symptoms themselves is the main way that poison hemlock poisoning is treated. So going through the list here, we have 2-methylpiperidine, and this one comes with a plethora of warnings, including it being harmful if it's swallowed, it can cause severe skin burns and eye damage, and it can also affect the respiratory system. Conine is present in high levels in poison hemlock. It disrupts the central nervous system and leads to death from respiratory paralysis. And this alkaloid originates from the alkaloid lambda-conakine, and lambda-conakine is most prevalent in the early stages of the poison hemlock plant growth and is a precursor to other alkaloids like conine. It's also more toxic than many of the other alkaloids in the plant. So conine and lambda-conakine are the ones that you'll hear about the most when it comes to poison hemlock toxicity. Some of the other alkaloids present are pseudoconhydrine here, which also originates from lambda-conakine, and methylconine, which is present in small amounts in the plant. Conhydrinone originates from lambda-conine as well. Conhydrinone also originates from lambda-conakine. 1-oxo-Y-conakine I couldn't find much information about. Conhydrine is present in small amounts in the plant. It's toxic if it's swallowed and can result in skin irritation, eye irritation, and may also cause respiratory irritation as well. N-methyl-pseudoconhydrine is in high amounts in the leaves and the stem, whereas conmaculatin, aka 2-pentylpiperidine, is present in low amounts in the plant. These last two shown on the picture I couldn't find much information about at all. Now, as for symptoms of poison hemlock poisoning, they vary based on the individual and how much exposure they had. Some people get irritated skin when they touch poison hemlock, others don't. It can affect us humans, it can affect pets, livestock, it can affect birds, but they need higher doses of the toxins in order for the poisoning to take effect. Cattle are the livestock that appear to be the most sensitive to the toxins, so they need far less of it to be harmed than other animals do. It's also especially dangerous to children and those who are pregnant or breastfeeding. Common symptoms when eating it are loss of speech, hypersalivation, can lead to respiratory issues, paralysis, and death. Also note that a common symptom with water hemlock poisoning is convulsions and seizures, but that symptom is not very common when it comes to poison hemlock poisoning. Now, in livestock, symptoms can mimic those of organophosphate or carbamate insecticide poisoning and include symptoms like nervous trembling, pupil dilation, which is when the pupils get really big, cold extremities like cold legs, again, the hypersalivation, bloating, and also a mousy smell in the urine and breath, loss of concentration, and rapid but weak pulse. And then all of these symptoms can then be followed by respiratory paralysis, coma, and eventually death. In horses and cattle, symptoms can include frequent urination or defecation, staggering, and they can also end up taking abnormally deep breaths. In a livestock case study that I read, cows exhibited symptoms within 36 to 48 hours after eating alfalfa that it was contaminated by poison hemlock. If a pregnant animal consumes poison hemlock and survives, the offspring can end up having skeletal birth defects, such as limb deformities, like leg deformities and cleft palate. And this is apparently a result of the toxin's paralyzing effects, reducing the movement of the fetus while it's developing. And although livestock tend to avoid this plant as long as other food is available, if it's mixed up with hay or pasture grasses, that's how they might accidentally ingest it and then become poisoned. Treatment for overdose in animals tends to involve gastric lavage, which is just another way of saying, pumping the stomach, and also activated charcoal, atropine to treat hypersalivation, magnesium sulfate, general respiratory support, and a saline cathartic, also known as a laxative. Treatment in humans tends to include respiratory support and activated charcoal. Toxins from poison hemlock can even pose a danger to people who just drink the milk from a cow who has consumed poison hemlock, or through eating the muscle tissue of birds who have eaten it. Now, there are various ways that poison hemlock can be controlled. If in a pasture or a garden, if they're fewer in number and haven't matured to the point of flowering yet, so if they're less than 2 years old, they can be controlled by digging it out of the ground, if you're wearing proper protective gear like gloves and sleeves, and as long as you're sure to remove the entire root. It's recommended to not burn this plant because the smoke could contain toxins. And then it's also recommended, once it's dug out, to leave it out for a few days before disposing of it, as the toxin severity diminishes if the plant isn't fresh. Herbicides can also be used, especially if the plants are younger and immature. Some common herbicides that are effective against poison hemlock are 2,4-D plus dicamba, glyphosate, and triclopyr, or triclopyr. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that one. Due to environmental hazard concerns, check the herbicide label for restrictions and be careful to use it around bodies of water. The way to control the plant is through the defoliating hemlock moth, Agonopteryx alstroa mariana. That moth feeds on the plant, and so it can help control its growth. And now, why should we care about poison hemlock? There are many reasons why we should care, ranging from the agricultural impact that it has on livestock, just in general to keep ourselves, our kids, and our pets safe, and also the potential uses of it against certain cancers. Agriculturally, poison hemlock serves as a host for carrot thinleaf virus, celery mosaic virus, alfalfa mosaic virus, and most recently, poison hemlock virus Y. So that's another reason why it's important to keep it controlled when possible. Additionally, the estimated cost of livestock loss each year to poison weeds in general in the western United States, at least, is $340 million, although it's unknown exactly how much of that is due specifically to poison hemlock. Now, poison hemlock was historically used medicinally as a sedative and antispasmodic. It does continue to be used in medicine as an ingredient in homeopathic medicines, even though this is very dangerous, as it takes very, very little of it to be toxic, and not much is known on its contraindications with other medicines. That is, we don't know much about how it reacts with other medicines that could potentially be detrimental to your own health. And that in general also is just why it's a good idea to talk to your doctor before taking any new medicine or supplement, because you want to know you're going to be taking isn't going to interact with medicines that you're already taking that might be, detrimental to your health and cause you more harm than good. A study from 2021 found that extracts from poison hemlock leaves could potentially be effective against F. oxysporum, which is a wilt pathogen, which means that it affects a plant's vascular system. And it could also be a potent antioxidant agent, which means that it can prevent or delay cell damage. As for potential cancer treatment qualities, 2 studies in 2006 tested poison hemlock as well as a few other things for their effectiveness against prostate and breast cancers. Poison hemlock had no effect on either of these cancers in either study. A study in 2014 focused on testing poison hemlock's properties, specifically conium, against cervical cancer cells. And this study supported the anti-cancer potential for conium in relation to cervical cancer. So that is potentially really good news for the future. More studies need to be done on it. They need to confirm that it can actually assist with this and it wasn't just a one-time thing in the study, but it could potentially be good news in the future for those with cervical cancer. And then a study in 2023 found that a few phytochemicals extracted from poison hemlock showed promise against metastatic colorectal cancer. Although again, same as before, more research is needed to explore it as a potential treatment before it can be used as a potential treatment against these cancers. Now to go into some of the case studies. I'm going to put a trigger warning for this for both death and in one study, taking one's own life. So if that's not something that you really want to listen to, just skip forward. So the first case study is the one that's probably the most well-known incidence of poison hemlock poisoning, especially when used in an execution, and that is the death of Socrates. So as this translation of Plato says, "And he walked about until, as he said, his legs began to fail, and then he lay on his back, according to the direction. And the man who gave him the poison now and then looked at his feet and legs, and after a while he pressed his foot hard and asked him if he could feel, and he said no, and then his leg, and so upward, and showed us that he was cold and stiff. And he felt them himself, and said, when the poison reaches the heart, that will be the end. He was beginning to grow cold about the groin." However, some other references that I found also noted that although hemlock poisoning does result in paralysis, it doesn't quite exhibit that symptom in the same way that Socrates' death is reported. Also, some of the more common symptoms like the bad taste and gastrointestinal effects weren't mentioned in this particular instance, and this could be due to other things being mixed in with the poison drink, but it might also have been a case of Plato reporting Socrates' death in a way to make it seem more noble. We just don't really know. And the second one is a little 6-year-old girl. A 2014 paper discusses the case of a 6-year-old girl who mistook poison hemlock for parsley and ate it. Within about 2 hours after eating it, she started exhibiting symptoms when she was brought to the emergency room with hypersalivation, so the drooling. She also had a burning sensation in her mouth. Her hands were trembling. She was imbalanced when walking. And she also had limited tongue movement and just a general sense of lack of coordination. They treated her by pumping her stomach and administering activated carbon, also known as activated charcoal. And this is generally given as a powder mixed in with liquid for the patient to drink, or if the symptoms are bad enough and they can't drink it, then it's tube fed to the patient. Lab work also showed that the girl had abnormalities with her blood clotting, and then after testing confirmed that poison hemlock was indeed the cause of the poisoning, she was further treated with intravenous, IV in the vein fluids, and also a plasma transfusion. Within 6 to 8 hours after treatment started, the girl stopped trembling, and then within 12 to 14 hours, the hypersalivation diminished, and she was able to start talking again on the second day. In total, she was hospitalized for 3 days, and she did make a full recovery. This next case is for a 30-year-old man, and this is the trigger warning for taking one's own life. A 2017 paper discussed a more unique case of hemlock poisoning in that it wasn't ingested, but the poison hemlock was injected intravenously by the patient in an attempt to take his own life. A note he left behind stated the use of poison hemlock, and when they tested the contents of the syringe that he used, they found choline and methylconine and conhydrine, confirming that it was poison hemlock that he used. EMTs found him with no pulse, and he needed CPR when they found him. The EMTs also had to administer bicarbonate and epinephrine because he was going through cardiac arrest. Upon arriving at the emergency room, although he had already gone into cardiac once, they did note that he had not had any seizures. He had prolonged muscular weakness and encephalopathy, which covers many different brain illnesses and symptoms. And then because of the encephalopathy, he had what the paper referred to as persistent agitation. And 10 days after being admitted to the hospital, because of the agitation, he required a tracheostomy. And this is where a hole is created in the trachea to help a patient breathe if they can't do so properly through their mouth and nose. Lab work showed elevated lactic acid, which did resolve once he had been hydrated with IV fluids after a day in the hospital. The major weakness that he had slowly improved over the span of a week and then continued to improve. 4 days after being admitted to the hospital, he was able to regain adequate respiratory function. He was then discharged from the hospital and brought to a rehabilitation facility on the 23rd day of being hospitalized. It's unknown exactly how long he stayed in that rehabilitation facility, but at that point his encephalopathy had improved to where he could follow simple commands. He had also recovered most of his strength by that time. Although he greatly improved from the point when he was hospitalized, he did end up having mild cognitive deficits and also hypersexual behavior. And then the last case study I want to go over is that of a cat. So in 2022, a woman noticed that her cat had started acting strangely. It started limping, and then a few hours later, it couldn't walk or even drink. And the cat did end up having to be, euthanized, put to sleep. At first, the woman suspected that the cat just had a stroke, and then it's unclear as to how long after the cat's death she found this out, but at some point after, she was gardening and ended up getting a rash on her arm. And at that point, she did more research and found that she had poison hemlock in her yard. Cases like these, especially the ones involving children and pets, are the biggest reason why I wanted to start making these videos, because if parents and pet owners don't know what dangers to be on the lookout for, they aren't going to be able to prevent these potential tragedies. So if you or someone you know or a pet eats poison hemlock or any substance that you suspect could be poisonous, contact poison control right away. Unless, as stated on the poison control website, the patient has collapsed or is having a seizure or is having trouble breathing, or if you can't wake them up. In that case, call for an ambulance first, and then call poison control. If it's a plant or a mushroom that you aren't exactly sure what it is, poison control is going to need an identification of what exactly it is so that they can give you accurate advice on the next steps. And a good resource for being able to identify these plants and mushrooms is actually through a Facebook group called Poison's Help, Emergency Identification for Mushrooms and Plants. Many botanists and other experts worldwide contribute to this, and so it's a really good resource internationally. Just for identifying these toxic plants so that you can get the help that you need or that a loved one needs as fast as possible. However, please note, if you do use this Facebook group services to identify the plants, they do not give medical advice, and they have very specific rules on what information you need to post when asking for an identification. They have specific rules for who can make comments on posts. And then for poison control, it's helpful to have the information for them, like their phone number, maybe just posted on the fridge or something so that hopefully you never need it. But if you do, you'll have the number there so you aren't wasting time searching for it, so that you can just get the identification that you need as fast as possible and can get the advice that you need so that you can get treated as quickly as possible. So here in this slide are all of the poison control places that I could find easily the information for with the phone numbers worldwide, so that if you are in one of these areas, take note of the number and have that on hand just in case you ever need it. And finally, if you've watched this far, thank you. I really appreciate it. If you heard anything today that intrigues you or that you want to know more about, feel free to check out the resources that you'll see in a few minutes or in the description, or leave a comment if there's something you want to know about, and I can find out some more about it and respond to it and let you know what I find, or perhaps even make a video about it. I'm more than happy to take recommendations for any potential topics that you want to hear about. I'm not certain yet what the topic of my next video will be or when it will be finished. I have some ideas for different topics, I just haven't narrowed it down yet. This video has taken a little over a month to complete, so I'm guessing it'll be around the same time frame for future videos. So I'm guessing as far as any schedule that I can stick to goes, probably one video every 1 to 2 months. Like, the process might go faster as I keep doing this, but for now, that's the kind of schedule to expect. So thank you again. Please let me know what you thought, and if there are any topics in particular or any questions that you have, let me know, and I will be happy to try and find out that information for you. Otherwise, I'll see you soon in the next video. Toodles!